Hello. It's been a long time since I last spoke to you. I haven't been posting videos on this channel, and some of you may have already guessed the reason why. It's because I'm spending most of my time talking at various webinars. I have actually spoken at probably 14 to 15 webinars by now, and so therefore I can't imagine you missing me too much, because many of you may have already seen me speaking at webinars already. But those of you who haven't been hearing my talks at various webinars, here I am back again with my new video. And what I wish to talk about today is something which I had been meaning to talk about for a very long time, but something that forced my hand, as it were, was a review of a film that has just been released on an OTT channel, and it is based on the life of the person that we usually call the human computer, namely Shakuntala Devi. So it was this particular biopic which led me to think that maybe there is an aspect of Shakuntala Devi's life that needs to be better known. And one book in particular that she had written perhaps deserved to be better known, which is why this video, which I think promises to be a fairly lengthy one, so I am going to try your patience a little, but this video is going to be on a book that Shakuntala Devi wrote in the early 70s. Well, I mean, she began writing it in 1974, if I'm not mistaken, and then she continued to write it till she published it in 1976. So she says that she has been writing it for about 2 years. So therefore she began writing it in 1974 and it was published in 1976. The book that I'm talking about is not a book on maths. It is a book called The World of Homosexuals. Now, I am not going to speculate on why she wrote this book. What I will do instead is I'm going to direct you to this very, very interesting documentary of great historical importance, which is available on YouTube, called For Straights Only. The full documentary is available on YouTube, but you will find the details of the documentary in the description of this video. I would strongly recommend that you watch it. In that documentary, Shakuntala Devi talks a little bit about the writing of this book and indeed, about homosexuality. But today I wish to talk about the book in particular, because I think it is an absolutely magisterial book, and I'm surprised that this book has not been reissued. Even as a historical document, I think the book has got great importance. And I think that this book should be rushed into reprint as soon as possible. So what is it that she does in this particular book called The World of Homosexuals? Well, she, for a reason that I'm not going to mention in the video, embarked on a particular project which was to understand homosexuality, because till something happened in her life, she didn't have any idea about homosexuality, or at least didn't think about it very seriously. But once this event happened, she was forced to think about the subject of homosexuality, and then she started to do a lot of research. Remember that she was very, very widely traveled. So she met people in other countries as well. She met people in America, she met people in Canada. There is actually an interview with a Canadian gay couple in the book as well. So she did a lot of reading as well, and I was quite astonished to find the extent of her reading. So everybody from Plato right down to Evelyn Hooker, Christopher Isherwood, Gore Vidal, they are all here. So she has clearly done her research incredibly well. The book is actually divided into, I think it is divided into 16 chapters, very small chapters because it's a thin book. It is divided into 16 chapters, and in each chapter she decides to focus on an aspect of homosexuality as she regards it. The introduction is very interesting, or the preface is very interesting, because she says that there are two kinds of books that are available in the West on homosexuality. One kind of book which is confessional, which can be classed as autobiographies, and these, she says, are marked by guilt and self-hatred. So that is something which she says is a recurrent thing that happens in gay biographies. And then the other kind of book that she talks about is the kind of book which is sort of more medical, so it is sort of scientific. So these are broadly the books that she talks about. Then she says, why am I writing this book? And she says that I am not a homosexual myself. I am not somebody who is doing research on homosexuality, so therefore why am I writing this book? And she says that my only qualification for writing this book is that I'm a human being. So that is her justification, is that she is writing the book just because she is a human being. And she says that, you know, there is ignorance and prejudice on sexual matters, and she hopes, at least that is what I get from the book, she hopes that the book is going to go some way towards dispelling some of the ignorance and some of the prejudice that usually circulates around the matter of sexuality. And you will be very, very interested to know that this is a book that does not shy away from anything. So she will talk about the details of gay sex. She will talk about the details of lesbian sex. She will talk about blowjobs, and she actually uses the term blowjobs. She will talk about 69. So she talks about everything in as much detail as she can master. So she is not holding back. The other thing that she is not holding back is the preconceived notions about sexuality that she brings into the project. And she is not being clever in hiding her preconceived notions. And this is something that comes across very, very clearly when she is interviewing the Canadian gay couple, because she asks them, why do you want to get married? What is the point in getting married? You know, are you doing this just to get some attention? So she is very forthright in her questions, even if those questions appear now in 2020 to be offensive, but she still asks them. And I think perhaps the most offensive question that she asks in this particular interview with the Canadian gay couple is that she says, I understand that you've gotten married now, but please tell me in your relationship who is the husband, who is the wife. Now, what is interesting is that this particular interview with the Canadian couple, it comes it comes towards the end of the book. It is the anti-penultimate chapter of the book. So there is the interview with the Canadian gay couple, then there is an interview with an Indian gay man, and also an interview with a Sanskrit scholar, and then there is the final conclusion. So the interview with the Canadian gay couple comes fairly late in the book. Now, what is interesting is that to this Canadian gay couple, she asks this question about, oh, in your relationship, who is the husband and who is the wife? Whereas earlier in the book, and that is what I think makes it so interesting, is that earlier in the book, she says very, very clearly that this is something which, people should not, talk about at all. She says very clearly that, she says, there is always the question in homosexual relationships, who is the husband and who is the wife? But in these relationships, there is no need to define one as the husband and the other as the wife. She's writing this in page 18, but by the time we come to page 133, she is asking the Canadian couple who's the husband, who's the wife. So I am not terribly sure how this book was put together, but my guess is that the chapters were probably not arranged chronologically. So my guess is that perhaps the interview had taken place clearly. It had obviously taken place before the book was written. I think that the interviews could very well have been clubbed together in the beginning, and then the chapters could have followed, instead of giving this one interview at the beginning of the book, and a bunch of interviews towards the end of the book. So I don't quite understand how the book was arranged like this, but one is very grateful that the interviews are there. And the reason why one is very grateful to the interviews are there because in the first particular interview, it is very, very interesting how Shakuntala Devi is absolutely horrified when she comes to know that this gay man that she is going to that she is interviewing is actually going to get married, and she's quite horrified. She says that if I can just find the part, she says, but really, you're not serious about getting married, are you? And to which the man says, I am. I'm going to be married. The reception is in the Lal Bagh. I hope you'll be in town. You must come. And Shakuntala Devi is getting very, very upset. And she says, now look, I just don't understand. To which the man says, there's nothing to understand, really. I'm 30 now, and my parents have been after me to get married for the last 6 years. They've started getting horoscopes from girls' parents almost from the time I left college. And after all, I have a duty towards my family. And Shakuntala Devi insists, she says, but how do you expect to make a success of your marriage? To which the man says, now, look, you're talking like a foreigner, which I think is very interesting. I think you're talking like a foreigner. What success in marriage in India anyway? It's only a commercial arrangement. So here is somebody who is a gay man who is very, very happy that his mother has been able to negotiate a very good price for him. And that's exactly what he says. He says, oh, my parents are very hard bargainers, They've struck the best deal, particularly mother. She's a great bargainer, starting from brinjals and onions up to a matrimonial dowry. There are words in it that will actually send shivers down your spine. He says she has wangled out quite a lot. Diamond earrings, diamond necklace, a Fiat, silver utensils, lots of cash, and she expects to squeeze more out of them just before the marriage at the 11th hour. You know the old trick. It is horrifying to actually hear somebody talk like this, a gay man no less, talk like this. Now, what is interesting also about this particular man is that he says that, pardon me for being so direct, says Shakuntala Devi, but you're such a handsome man. Lots of young girls must be losing their hearts to you. How exactly do you tackle them? So to which this man says, there's always been a problem, The girls think that I look like Rock Hudson. Now, when I read that line, that girls think that I look like Rock Hudson, a shiver ran down my spine. Because remember, this is being written in 1970s. There's no way on earth that this man could have known, or indeed Shakuntala Devi could have known, that Rock Hudson was indeed gay. So there is no way in which this could have known, and yet Rock Hudson makes his appearance. Rock Hudson's homosexuality was exposed only when he was diagnosed with AIDS, which happened in 1980, 84, 85, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So clearly, almost 10 years before, Rock Hudson has already made an appearance in an interview with a gay man. And Rock Hudson was very, very firmly in the closet at that time, just as this man who is being interviewed is in the closet. So that, I think, is rather extraordinary. Shakuntala Devi is still very, very upset. She says, I simply don't understand why you're getting married. Why are you ruining a girl's life? This is a kind of cruelty. And to which the man gets very impatient and he says, I have got a meeting to attend. He says, I'm getting late for my meeting. Will you please excuse me? And Shakuntala Devi ends the interview by saying, sorry I detained you so long. Thanks for the lovely coffee. And when she says that, it almost breaks your heart, because you know that when she says thanks for the lovely coffee, you know that her heart is breaking as well. Because you know that she is deeply, deeply upset by what she has heard from this man who is extremely happy to be getting married, and he also believes that he can keep his boyfriend. He's also in a relationship with somebody who he says works in the public sector He says that. Yes, I have a steady friend now right here in Bangalore. He holds a junior position in a public sector undertaking. So he is in a relationship and he has absolutely every intention of continuing that relationship while being married to this woman. Shakuntala Devi is hearing all of this. She is horrified, but she doesn't have the words to express it. So all that she can say is thanks for the lovely coffee. What happens in the rest of the book is quite astonishing because she takes you from chapter to chapter to chapter through the way in which homosexuality is dealt with in religion, very interestingly. And this is something which I don't think makes an appearance even in Ruth Vanita and Salim Kidwai's book, Same-Sex Love in India. She says that in Ramayana, apparently, Ram is once described as Purusha Mohana Rupaya, which means so handsome as to enthrall men too. So this is something that Shakuntala Devi makes it a point to mention in the chapter on religion. There's a lot about Christianity there. She talks a lot about the law. Then she goes on to talk about psychiatric perspectives. She gives you an extraordinary summary of the research that have been done by psychiatrists and psychologists with almost, here it comes, mathematical precision. And she gives you the summary of the work that has been done from 1957 by Evelyn Hooker all the way down to 1970, which is sort of bringing it absolutely up to date to the time when she's writing the book. She devotes an entire chapter to the Kinsey report, the Kinsey scale of 1 to 6. You all know that, 1 being exclusively heterosexual, 6 being exclusively homosexual. A whole chapter is given to the Kinsey report. She talks about homosexuality in prisons. She also mentions that the instances of homosexuality in prisons was already written about by somebody called J.A. Fishman way back in 1934. If you're going to read this book somehow, quite apart from the wonderful attitude that she has towards homosexuality, what will also strike you is the wealth of information that she has managed to marshal. Books that are no longer in print, books that very few people have heard of, but books that are certainly mentioned in this particular extraordinary project. She devotes an entire chapter on male sex workers, which she calls commercialized homosexuality. So that is primarily for men who have sex with men for money. She gives you an entire chapter on homosexuality in literature and film, in which she talks about Marcel Proust. She talks about André Gide, and by the way, I hope to make a video on André Gide's book Corridon very soon. I'm just reading it right now. Since I'm reading it in the French original, it is taking me a little bit of time. She talks about Oscar Wilde's anonymously published pornographic gay novel called Teleny. She also mentions that apparently in 1001 Nights, there are several stories that deal with homosexuality. Also, she talks about several films. Most importantly, when she comes to Indian cinema, she mentions 2 films that apparently she finds available to a kind of queer reading. Of course, she doesn't use the term queer reading, but a kind of looking at the movie through the gay lens. Guess what those 2 films are that she singles out as ripe for a queer reading? Dosti and Sangam. Sangam, of course, is the Raj Kapoor film. There is an entire section on venereal diseases. Also, there is talk about the homosexual and the community, and this is where I think a little bit of editing would have been a good idea, because there are books that she mentions over here. Remember, she mentions Christopher Isherwood's A Single Man. She mentions James Baldwin's Giovanni's Room. James Baldwin's birthday, incidentally, is tomorrow. She mentions Gore Vidal's The City and the Pillar. She also mentions Radcliffe Hall's The Well of Loneliness. She goes on to talk about Gay Lib. Stonewall Riots is mentioned. And she talks about, as I told you before, this is an interview that she has with Chris and Rich, who were married on 11th of February 1971 in Canada, but at the time when the book is being written, their marriage is still not recognized and they're fighting for the rights to marriage. And we also come to the point where she has the interviews of two Indian men. One, as I told you, is Sashi, who is a 31-year-old man who lives in Pune. And much, much more interesting, I found, was the interview with the Sanskrit scholar and a priest as well. And his name is Srinivasa Raghavacharya. Now, I will have to read out this part because there is no way in which I can summarize this. So she is asked, he's asked rather, what do you think of homosexuality? To which this is the priest answers. This is what the priest says. He says, I attribute it entirely to reincarnation. Reincarnation? Yes. This clearly proves the Hindu theory of reincarnation. Shakuntala Devi is completely taken aback. She says, how? I'm surprised. The man very, very calmly says, the explanation is very simple. These men and women who are now attracted to members of their own sex were in their previous incarnations lovers belonging to the opposite sex. In this birth, though the sex might change, the soul remains the same. And the power of the soul transcends all bodily limitations and tries to reach out for the beloved. Now, what is extraordinary over here, quite apart from the fact that, reincarnation or rebirth used to justify homosexuality is something that Ruth Vanita and Salim Kidwai certainly mention in their book, Same-Sex Love in India. But what also remarkably seems to carry over in this particular instance is the Platonic idea that we've already found in Symposium, where you remember love is basically about two people who are constantly trying to seek each other out. And it is about the union of bodies as much as it is about the union of soul. So the fact that this particular idea should be espoused by a priest and a Sanskrit scholar talking about homosexuality in 1970s is, I think, something that we need to take a very careful look at. Also, he continues, Earth is overpopulated by the human species. Earth is overpopulated by the human species. Remember, he's talking about it in 1970s. And the Earth Mother, Bhuma Devi, is no longer able to carry the burden. So this is one of Mother Nature's way of combating the population explosion. Nature will not allow any species to dominate completely, and we've made great strides forward toward elimination of all disease. Eminent pediatricians have forecast that a child born today may very well have a life expectancy of 100 years. That has come true. You must admit this would upset the ecological balance. Flies and mosquitoes live just as long today and no longer than they did 1,000 years ago. The same is true of elephants, chimpanzees, cockroaches, and even oak trees. It is only man who has acquired the ability to prolong his lifespan. I see, says Shakuntala Devi. What's more, the sly human is exterminating vitally important insect, plant, and even mammalian life in order to make life for himself more luxurious. My God! Please note again, 1976. This, of course, you understand, creates an unnatural imbalance in the life pattern. I love the way in which he's using the word unnatural over here. So to him, homosexuality is not unnatural. The way in which we are destroying the environment, that is unnatural. Shakuntala Devi says there are also other practical problems. Experts have decreed that in 100 years or less, we won't be able to feed the population at that time unless we devise some other means of growing food. And this is where the Sanskrit scholar says, there's also mankind's pressing and overriding desire to reach out to other planets. Sounds familiar? Yes? Elon Musk. Now we are about to conquer Mars. He's already talking about it in 1976. These are all Mother Earth's plans to relieve herself of the burden of the mass of humanity. How extraordinary! Shakuntala Devi is completely overcome. To which this man says, all we can do is sit back and wonder at the divine tricks of the Almighty. This is a very moving interview, and it turns out to be an unsuspectingly wise interview as well, in which, a kind of queer eco-criticism is beginning to take place, right? So I strongly recommend this book. It is so sad that this book is not available. In the final chapter, she talks about her opposition to conversion therapy, which, let me remind you, is still legal in India. There is still no law against conversion therapy. So a parent or indeed parents can take their gay son or lesbian daughter to be cured of homosexuality. That is still not a punishable offense. And of course, she talks about the way in which the law must be amended. So this has been a fairly long video, but I think it is a video that needed to be made because I don't know whether the biopic that has been released of Shakuntala Devi mentions this book or not. But I think this is a very important part of the legacy that Shakuntala Devi has left behind for all of us. She has not only taught us how to enjoy maths, but she has perhaps also made one of the first pleas on how to learn to live with one another without judging, without being censorious. Live and let live is the message that she seems to have left in this extraordinary book, The World of Homosexuals. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you again for my next video.